Welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Chalmley, and this is another video in a series on Shropshire churches. We're here in a very exciting, interesting and unusual building. This is the Church of St Mark, Frodesley. It's an ancient site. There's a church here at least as far back as the 1270s. But the present building dates from 1809, which is an unusual date for a surviving church building. It's Georgian. That's the first decade of the 19th century. And it's a building that reflects that. It also has a Victorian aisle added in the 1850s, which we shall look at. But it's very unusual. It's a church which still has its west gallery, its box pews. The high pulpit has gone, although the pulpit itself survived. It's been taken down, cut down, and no longer has a three-decker, but much of the character is still the same, and many of the furnishings and memorials in fact come from the previous building on this site, 18th, 17th century. So let's have a look around and see the details of this amazing survival of a church of the Georgian period. So here we are inside St Mark's, and we're beneath the West Gallery, as you can see. It's a very typical West Gallery. Whenever there's a West Gallery, you're going to have your two pillars holding it up. Beneath is a memorial here, one of the ones that would have been transferred from the previous building here, in memory of William Yates, late of Bentleyford, who died January the 23rd, 1783, aged 62. Also here lieth the body of Mary France. She died January the 21st, 1805, aged 78 years. Probably she would have been his widow who remarried. You can see, unusually, the scoring lines for the writing, so that you can see this is how the mason has managed to get everything together the way it should be. There's an Untitled vestry down here and the gallery stairs. We won't go up the gallery, it's possible to, but it is rather rickety. Now, you have to picture this as it would have been when it was first built. The pulpit would have been much higher, there'd been a three-decker there. The communion table would have been brought forward. There'd have been three-sided rails as at Longnor. But we've got here still the box pews, the pews for the various families. Now this is right by a country house, right by Frodesley Hall. It's unusual in that it's one of these parishes that had, to use the common name, a squarson. That is to say, the squire and the parson were one and the same person. The big house then would have been the home of the rector. And we have here a memorial, first of all, to a former rector, the Reverend Thomas Edwards, and it's the Edwards baronets who are the owners of the big house. They are the squarsons. So here we have the memory of two brothers, sons of the Reverend Benjamin Edwards, Henry John Edwards, Lieutenant, 15th Regiment, Bengal Native Infantry, who on his way to join his regiment in the Second Sikh War was thrown from his horse and died at Firozpur on the banks of the Sutlej, November the 14th, 1848, aged 30. And Francis Edwards, Lieutenant, 30th Regiment, Madras Native Infantry, Honourable East India Company's Service, who being appointed Adjutant of the 2nd Regiment Punjab Irregular Infantry in the Bengal Presidency, died of fever at Kotakangra in the Himalaya, October the 20th, 1847, aged 25. The service in the East cost both of them their lives. And so we have the Reverend Thomas Edwards, Benjamin Edwards. Here is a family who serve the church, the state. You can see the very elegant communion rails. Those are original. The pulpit is the top, as I've said, of the original three-decker, and you can just see the front there. It's It's been adapted, it's been brought down. Note the candles. The table now is altar-wise. It is against the wall, which was actually illegal. The Good Shepherd window, and rather unfortunately, has that bar over the eyes of the figure of Jesus. And here we have John Thomas Cholmondeley Edwards, Baronet, rector who died in 1816. Here, Charlotte Edwards, one of his daughters, and his Reverend Benjamin Edwards, who died 1822, and there's an Edwards funeral hatchment. Here's the organ, 19th century, of course. It's the 19th century when the organ becomes de rigueur in churches. And there's the West Gallery. Before the organ, that's where the singers would have been. You'll notice it has two bells, a ding and a dong. These here are the church warden's staffs. This is for the bishop's warden. You can tell because it has a bishop's mitre on it. And the church wardens, these are staffs of office now. They are borne on ceremonial occasions only. Church wardens used to have staves to biff sleeping congregants with, but that is no longer allowed. This is the people's warden here. You will notice again the 1850s Victorian aisle, which is in a completely different style from the rest of the building. The rest of the building is this very elegant little Georgian temple type structure, and the Victorians have whacked this great big medieval style aisle onto a building that's completely unsuited for. Now the church Bible here is very interesting because it dates from, look at that, 1807. Oxford. It's an authorised version, of course, nothing else available at the time. And there we are, that's the reader's position looking out over the box pews. And it's all much as it has been for over 100 years. There are plans now to change things. That's rather unfortunate. One of the church warden's staff was bent. But the plans to change things to turn this aisle, which isn't used. I mean, originally it had pews in it. It had extra seating in, but now all it's got in is the organ. There's just one of the pews there, and it has the font. And here are the plans to change things a bit, and it sadly will involve getting rid of the organ. Now this is an interesting picture. This is the church as it was. This is probably the 13th century building, what it looked like in 1780. And you can see it's a bit of a tumble-down structure. It's leaning over sideways. I suspect that's why it was eventually demolished. And here we have the seating, the old box pews, some of which at least would have been actually brought, maybe all of them actually brought from the old building, because this has to be on the footprint. You can see the windows with their cast iron tracery, these rounded windows. The hall is on that side, on the south side, and that's why there can't be a south door. But here we have the building as it was, and again this is from the hall side. There used to be a clergyman's door there, a priest's door, which has since gone. The font, the original font, is Norman, and this is a Norman tub. You can see why it's called a tub, because it basically is a tub. It's a great big stone tub that you could dip an infant into, because that is how baptism was conducted. It was dipping. You immersed infants. So here we are, it's inside the font, and that would have been filled up with water with a plug at the bottom. Today, of course, it is not filled up. There will be something inside it, a bowl of some kind. But in the 18th century, this is what they used. The Birdbath Font. Birdbath is a bit of a rude name for it, but it does summarise what it looks like. It's a little font for, you'd have a bit of water in there, and you could sprinkle the infant like that. There is here a bit from the Doomsday Book, and here is the font in the church. You can see it's an engraving of what we can see today, with a big crack in it, because this is a font that has been disused for a while. And there again, the gallery front. The organ, that's the organ blower. In the 19th century, there'd been a little boy pumping up and down. And a chest, glass case that used to have something in it, and the look through into the chancel. And then there's just a couple of stained glass windows. This is just a patterned one. And that's the church as it used to be. It had a stuccoed front, but the stucco has had to be removed for various reasons. And through here is the chapel stroke vestry. So that's the inside of Frodesley, this fascinating building. As I say, it's very unusual to find a building of the early 19th century that hasn't been massively altered. There's been alterations, of course. The Squarsons have changed their approach to things. There's high church elements, but really it's still very much a Georgian building, for which we are glad. Well, let's go outside and have a look at the outside of this little Georgian building. Squarsons they might have been, but the Edwards family, Edwards baronets of Frodesley, were not immensely loaded, and what they built in this little village would have looked like a little neoclassical temple. Originally it would have been stuccoed, except for the pilasters. You can see that very rough stonework, but undoubtedly the stucco has been removed because of problem with damp, which is a problem with stucco. And then 1850s roll around, and it's actually, we would like to have something that looks a little bit more medieval, a bit more churchy, as people sometimes say. You can see there the house beyond. It's not one of the vast mansions of Shropshire. It's one of the nice smaller country houses, and the church fits it very well. You can see the gable one end, pediment at one end, and the hip on the other. The rounded windows, obviously the hall wall means that there's no going round the south side. You can just see the north side here in all of its simplicity, with its little bell cot and its weathered stone that would have had the date on it, and the declaration as to which of the Edwards baronets of Frodesley built it way back in 1809. But an interesting point to note, of course, is again this neoclassical style. This is what 1809 likes. This is the Georgians. And then next door there's the Victorians, who say we don't like the Georgian version, we want this Gothic instead. So there we are, Frodesley, the very exciting interior. And the exterior is interesting, but really it's one side. And it's very typical of that kind of era, that you've just got this one side that equals, this is the interesting bit. Beautiful overgrown graveyard. They're deliberately left to get overgrown very often these days, as you can see, and surrounded on two sides here. You can see the gate at the end here. Surrounded on two sides by the big house, by the hall, and the gate is very properly bolted and padlocked to prevent anyone who might try to wander off into the grounds of the country house to look at the end of the church, because after all this is private property here. So there we are, Frodesley, with all of its excitement. A church from 1809 that still feels very much like an 1809 building would have. Simplicity itself. A church where your vicar, your rector, was also probably your landlord and your squire. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed coming here and seeing this amazing little building, and hope to continue to share videos like this with you. and may God bless you and keep you. Amen.